Hi, y'all. Welcome to your first session after lunch. You are in meeting room C. We are going to hear the presentation Open Daily, Operating a Farmer-Owned Retail and Aggregation Outlets. Our speakers today are Mike Record and Armonda Riggs, and excited to hear about the project that they have going on. Want to remind you, I'm going to pass out these lavender session feedback cards. Please fill them out. They really are read, and everything that you write on here is taken into consideration for future programming. I know we're getting started a little bit late, but there's going to be lots of time for questions, and want to remind you to please wait until someone gets to you with a microphone to ask your question, because this is being recorded and it will be helpful to everyone to be able to hear your very thoughtful question in the recording. I will just turn this over to our speakers, and thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you for having us. So I am Armonda Riggs, and Mike and I, we have slides to introduce ourselves, but we wanted to start our presentation off with, do you all have any questions immediately? So you read our session description, maybe you Googled the farm stop. Do you have any questions? Because we want to write them down and make sure we address them while we're doing our presentation. Anything buzzing immediately? No? Okay. Okay, so that is not the right slide. We're supposed to be in our, right? Okay, so I just skipped through all of the agenda there, but so what we're going to do here today is go over, I apologize. Can you start that at the beginning for me again? I can't seem to get it back to the first slide. Thank you. So our purpose, which was the actual first one there, we are going to talk about who we are. And so then we're going to go into what is a farm stop exactly and why we need one, how it works, and the Rose Hill story specifically. And again, this is all for what we have. And we hope that you maybe pull something out of this that you guys can bring to your communities here or wherever you go back to from the conference. So who I am specifically, I am farmer, owner, operator of Four Flags Farm, and I have the privilege of being able to work on, it's actually a little over 31 acres total, and I am 21 miles away from Rose Hill, which is about a 24-minute drive. And I have a very, very diversified operation. So what I'm actually farming in currently is what's there in the boxes and circles. So I have 2 apiary sites. Those are the white circles. And I have the gray squares or rectangles there is what I am tapping for maple syrup production. And then I have a chicken pasture area, which is the red circle. And then I have a high tunnel and then an open produce growing area in the green. So I am looking at continuing to grow my operation and hopefully make more use of the rest of my property that I am privileged to have and farm on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Record, and I am one of the founding, now I got to figure out how to work this. All right, one of the founding steering committee members of Rose Hill Farm Stop. I, along with my wife, am also a farmer. I own New Ground Farm, which is a 1 acre certified organic vegetable market garden in Bloomington. We're actually, when I made this slide, oh no, I did correct it. So yeah, so this will be our 10th year. And we, obviously we sell it at Rose Hill, but we also have kind of a smaller scale version of Rose Hill on our farm. We have a self-serve honor system farm stand that we run out of a renovated goat dairy barn. We have, in the peak of the summer, anywhere from 17 to 18 vendors that sell through our farm stand. It's all on consignment. And so when I was approached about the Rose Hill project, I was particularly excited because I saw it as an opportunity to take what I've been doing on my farm and kind of scale it up. Okay, so we thought it might, before we jump into the nitty-gritty of how we got the Rose Hill Farm Stop started, we thought we might start at the end and define what it is, because the term may be unfamiliar to a lot of you, and maybe even the concept. So by show of hands, how many of you have heard the term farm stop before? Okay, a few. So for the rest of you, it's kind of a new concept. It's not something that we came up with. We actually have borrowed this idea. So in order for the rest of the things that we talk about to hopefully make more sense, we'll start by describing what this thing is. And this is our interpretation of what a farm stop is. And as we talk about our story and how we went from 0 to having an open store, we'll talk a little bit about where we got some of these ideas from. But to us, probably to summarize it the simplest, a farm stop is an everyday, year-round, everyday farmer's market. It has, so like a farmer's market, it's got products from lots of different vendors all in one place. Another key aspect of it, though, is that it is operated by some entity that's not trying to profit from the endeavor. The goal is to cover the operating costs while maximizing the income that the vendors are receiving through the sale of their products. So that low profit motive kind of underlies everything that we're doing and all the decisions that we've made. Another couple of key characteristics of a farm stop are that it is in a physical retail space, ideally a permanent space, and it is accessible. And the open daily aspect of it is one component of being accessible, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So, and we'll go into each of these things in more detail, but that's a photo on the right of the Rose Hill Farm Stop. It's actually in a building that had housed an appliance store for decades and decades, and it is pretty centrally located in downtown Bloomington. Let's see, another characteristic is that it contains a mix of farm and what we call artisan products. So the primary focus really is on food products, but we recognize that in order for it to be a viable business and to foster a good customer experience, that we needed to have more than just food. We needed to have craft products, especially around the holidays. And a lot of times those craft products and artisan products are coming from a farm business, but sometimes they're not. So things like woodworking, pottery, textiles, art, things like that, we also have in the store. And another key element is we're really trying to support or even build our local food economy. So everything we sell through the store, we would like to source as close as possible. Now, we don't have any sort of fixed distances that limit how far things can come from, but we've tried to adopt what we call like a bullseye model. So for any product that we think we really need in the store that our customers want, if there's a producer that's in the bullseye on the target, meaning really close to the store, we'll source there. If there's no one, we'll go out into successive rings with the target until we find somebody. The idea, though, is that hopefully we can encourage some enterprising entrepreneur to recognize this gap in the local market and take the initiative to try to fill that gap. And at that point, we can source that product from closer to the bullseye. So that kind of gets back to that desire to help strengthen our local economy, and maybe there's some element of food sovereignty in there, sort of referring back to our keynote speaker, which we didn't think about until we heard that talk, so that's kind of cool. All right, what else? So I mentioned physical space, a building, it's inside. there's a couple of benefits that gives us. One of the things that we think is really important is professional product displays. So our farm stop is like a farmer's market in that there are products from lots of different vendors there, but it's also like a grocery store in that we want things, especially perishable products, to be stored in a way that maximizes their quality, which means freshness and attractiveness to customers. So that means we're using produce deck, we're using refrigerated merchandisers, glass-fronted freezers, we're using produce tables, professional baskets, signage. So when you go in, and we've got a couple of videos that will show you the inside of the store, but it kind of looks like a grocery store. The last thing that is sort of a key characteristic of the Farm Stop model is that it actually contains a cafe. So there's not just the grocery part. There is a part of the store that has tables and chairs, and we can make coffee, and we can serve prepared food, and tea, and we can serve prepared foods. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but just to summarize why a cafe, all of the vendor products are sold on a consignment basis, and in order to fund or cover the operating costs, that we set that fee at a level that will hopefully achieve that, but we don't want to charge the farmers and the vendors too much because we want as many of the dollars flowing through the store to go back into their pockets. So we're trying to kind of do this balancing act. In order to help with that problem, the cafe, which typically operates at a higher margin, actually helps subsidize the grocery side of the business. So on the grocery side, because the income that the Farm Stop gets for operating is basically fixed at our consignment fee, so say 32%, on the cafe side, we have a little more control over the margin there because when we purchase the supplies for the cafe or ingredients for the food, maybe we could buy in larger quantities and get a discount and so reduce our costs a little bit there. So the whole idea is that the cafe operates at a higher margin, and that helps subsidize the grocery side of the business, which lets us keep our fees to the vendors lower and therefore puts more money in their pocket. There's a couple of other benefits to the cafe. One, it actually can serve as an additional outlet for some of our vendors that maybe make baked goods they can sell through the cafe, and the Farm Stop will purchase those on a wholesale basis. It also can help minimize food waste. As perishable products start to go bad on the shelves, we can divert those through our kitchen and have staff turn that into soup or a salad or something that then can go out on the cafe floor and be sold there. So the cafe is actually a really important part of the model, and we'll talk later about how well that's working. Okay, so that's kind of, at a high level, a definition, at least our definition of a farm stop. I guess maybe could we take some questions now if anybody has them, just see. So did that prompt any questions from anybody? Okay, we got one over there.
I have an idea of the answer to this, but how is a farm stop different from a co-op?
Good question.
I guess it depends on what your definition of co-op would be, because for me, I see this very similar to that, but I guess it also what frame is the co-op working within, because ours is in a store location, right? So for us, I mean, I see this as fitting in with a co-op model.
You mean like a member-owned food grocery?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
in that co-op sense.
It's similar, and I think we may kind of answer that a little bit as we go through the structure of the organization, but the short answer is it's farmer-owned. So there's a cooperative of farmers that collectively own the business, and therefore we enjoy certain benefits as a result of that, namely more input into and control over the terms of how we're selling our products. So hopefully that answers a little bit. Okay, so, oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
With your different vendors that are bringing in, do you make them, or do you have them kind of specialize in what they're bringing in so that you don't duplicate?
Not yet.
That's a really good question. And
We're starting to see some of that, and yeah, we'll talk about that
yeah,
specifically.
the short answer is, so we've been open for a year and a half now. The shorter answer is no, we don't require them to specialize. No, we really haven't done much coordination as far as who's bringing what and how much. It's kind of just been a free-for-all. It's mostly worked out.
In a beautiful way, yeah.
Yeah. So, but we will address that later on when we talk about some of the successes and the challenges. Any others?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just curious, like, what is the population around you, like, in the town that this is in? And are you catering to, like, a higher-end market? Or just, like, thinking about how this applies in, like Appalachian regions closer to here?
Right. That's actually a perfect segue into the next section of the presentation. So we'll hold that question or that thought, and we'll answer it. Yeah. Is there somebody else? Okay. All right. So hopefully that gives you. It's still kind of vague, I know, and pictures will help, and we have pictures. But let's move on.
I do want to point out that most of the pictures we've shown this far, with especially food in it, is from our farm stop. So everything you're seeing on here, if you have questions, like, ask us, because we purposefully tried to put as much about the farm stop in the presentation so that it's like really accountable for what we're doing this work here. So yeah.
Okay, so we'll transition now and talk about our community, our local food scene, and why we felt like we needed a farm stop and what need it fulfills.
Yes, so we are in the South Central Indiana region, Bloomington specifically, because that's where the store is located. We are 1 hour south of Indianapolis. How many of you here know where Bloomington, Indiana is? Oh, well, that's wonderful. Welcome. Come back again sometime soon. So that is a little bit about our farm stop. Thank you. No, okay. I broke it the last time, but I'll try not to. So yes, again, we are actually in the ancestral home of the Shawnee, the Kickapoo, the Tuskegee, and Miami peoples. Home of Indiana University. Is that why you all know where Bloomington is? Okay, there's that. And we are a regional center in Bloomington. The resident population is 79,000. But in total, 175,000, and there are the student population is 49,000 there. Unfortunately, though, we do have the second lowest median income in the entire state, and this is in Monroe County, which is where Bloomington is. And we are the second poorest, so 21% of the population is below poverty level.
And just to note, those statistics are skewed by the student population. So,
but they are there, and,
right.
And we want them to come.
Right, but even so, the reality is there is definitely some need in our community.
We do have a strong local food scene with support for our area farmers markets. We do have 3 or 4 farmers markets, depending upon what time of year it is occurring. We do have a few modest-sized CSAs also occurring. There are restaurants that do buy from local producers. And we have currently 1 food co-op, Blooming Foods, and then not many other retail options, though, for selling direct local foods. So, despite all those wonderful other lovely things I said about our local food system, we still have our farmers who are small local producers struggling to achieve the financial viability to make this business operation, their sole source of income, or to keep it continuing. So most sales are concentrated in a 14-hour time frame within a week. If you have 2 or 3 markets happening, that's where your sales are occurring. And then there's insufficient sales outlets to support that farming, again, like I mentioned, full-time as a career. Wanted more ways to get products to the customers. So again, this was one of those things that how do we sell more product, right? How do we make that happen? So the customers then were struggling to purchase the local foods. So again, the same thing. We're just trying to show here that there was this need. So we had the purchasing opportunities were in that same time frame. And that sometimes those locations where the food was available was inconvenient and or inaccessible for those who wanted those products. And then our vendors were spread out over multiple markets. So, Saturday is when most of the markets are occurring. So our customers would have to go this market to get that market to get that. And so they're traveling maybe to all the markets, and it made it more challenging for them.
Can I just interject real quick? So there's a lot of backstory to the farmers market scene in Bloomington. Some of you may be somewhat familiar with it, made national news. The short of it is we had one of the biggest markets for a long time in the state. It was a thriving market, 120 plus vendors. On a good day, there'd be 10,000 people coming through the market. It split. Now we've got multiple markets all on the same day at the same time. We had, let's say, so this is 2020 we're talking about. We had vendors that couldn't decide which one to go to. We had customers that couldn't figure out where their vendors were. So that's kind of the backstory a little bit to why the farmers market became a challenge for both our farmers and our customers. So just wanted to interject that.
So again, just reinforcing why we need the farm stop. So our farm stop, we have farmer voice. It's very strong in the policies. And then again, it allows the farmers to set their terms and cost of participating. So what they're selling. And then we maximize the farmer income. So we set the cost as low as possible for becoming part of the membership. And then shorten distances between the farm to table. So we allow the farmers to stay on their farm and to do the farming that they want to be doing. So we increase access to local food, right? So again, that open daily concept, it's the farmer's market every day. We do have SNAP doubling, and then we're fostering the community between the producers and the customers. Complement, not compete with other existing outlets like the farmers market, and then reach new customers not already buying local food, because again, maybe it doesn't work for their time or location, but this is another venue they can go.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
So that's also another point that actually generated a fair amount of concern, not just among the farming community, but also customers in our area. When we proposed this, the first reaction was, well, isn't that going to take sales away from the existing markets, the farmers? So even though we had our farmers market have been struggling with this split and all the turmoil, they still were viable markets, and so it was a legitimate concern. And the plan for addressing that was to try to complement our other markets by being open on days that those markets weren't, and by offering products in a way that they weren't available at other places. So that's also another kind of thing that's underlying all this, is that we're not trying to replace any of our existing markets or compete with them, and so we've really worked hard to try to find ways to complement those markets and supplement them as best we could.
So the Farm Stop represents an important step toward building a stronger local food system in our local food community. So we asked our vendors to give us some thoughts to bring to you all. Seeing a sense from the statistics earlier, we have a lot of fellow farmers here. So we asked them to give us information, and so Mike and I are just going to kind of read through these.
And we didn't pick and choose, so there's some good and some bad in here too.
So the store has been really helpful to our farm. Financially, it has allowed us to have another outlet that is very consistent week to week, and very easy for us to adapt quantities and types of produce to focus on higher demand items.
The Rose Hill Farm Stop has been a really great supplement to our farm business model. It gives us much more freedom and allows us to diversify our audience. While the consignment fee does hurt our bottom line, it also frees up our time and gives us a much more stress-free way to sell.
What we have enjoyed the most has been working alongside similar-minded vendors and staff to provide another space to connect community to local food.
Being a member of the Farm Stop has been an integral part of being able to farm full-time. It allows us to sell produce and our value-added products year-round, 7 days a week, which brings in a consistent additional revenue and reaches an audience that we may not reach at just our weekly in-person market.
We are a brick and oven bakery that operates primarily in a farmer's market environment. Rose Hill Farm Stop has been great for us. It provides a modest but significant percentage increase in sales of items that we already produce, helping our efficiency and helping level our sales through the seasons and weather.
You can start to see a theme kind of starting to develop here. It's been extremely easy to work with Rose Hill. We have total flexibility on what and how much we deliver. Payment is automatic and reliable. They don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but it's...
Being involved with the Farm Stop has helped foster an increased sense of solidarity and fellowship amongst the neighborhood patrons, and especially amongst us farmers.
So let's talk a little bit about how it works. Got a question right here.
Yeah, so I saw the one they're talking about year-round. The store is open year-round.
Yeah, we close. There's a couple of holidays that we close in on, but I think that's maybe two, maybe 3 days. But every other day of the week, weather permitting, we're open. Well, you'll see that in a couple slides, but we're open from 8:30 to 6:30 every day.
Okay.
And so your vendor fees that you charge, is that what's paying for your staff?
Yep, that plus revenue from the cafe. Yeah. Any other questions before we? So the idea here is we're going to dig into how this actually works, how it's structured, and the details of product selection and delivery and all that. I think so.
Okay.
If you want me to talk.
So we are an agricultural cooperative, a retail store. In doing both of those, that means that we have paid management and operations staff. So we did form a cooperative and form that according to the laws that Indiana has, and that only agricultural producers can join the cooperative. So that's why we're farmer owned. Yeah, something to add?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll say it now rather than later. So that was also kind of a tough decision point. It was a group of farmers that started this whole thing, but from the very beginning we recognized that it was going to be important to have products from non-farmers in the store as well. So we really struggled with whether we should form maybe a more conventional cooperative or something else. And in the end, we kept coming back to the desire on the part of the farmers to have more input into and control over this sales outlet. And for that reason, in the end, we decided that we wanted to make this an agricultural cooperative, which would limit the membership to the farmers. And given that, we've tried to structure things in a way that some of our non-farm vendors have some input into what's happening in the store. But in the end, it is a cooperative of agricultural producers.
It does operate as a nonprofit, so exempt from income tax. The goal is to cover the cost and to maximize the vendor dollars that they are receiving from being in the co-op. So comprises member farmers, and then again with those rights that they have, voting rights, and then there are the annual dues with if they are not able to pay the due, there is the sponsorship or the work share option that they can participate in. And then we are governed by an elected board of directors, so the membership elects them. And collectively, the co-op members own the store. Currently 50 member farms and growing. I actually didn't mention that in the beginning, but I'm actually on the vendor member committee. So when we get applications that come in, we review them and then we send them on to the board with our recommendations.
Yeah, I think we've been adding 1 or 2, sometimes 3 new vendors, members a month is kind of where we've been. So we started out with, actually that's not entirely true. It kind of goes in spurts. So we seem to have a wave of 2 or 3 a month, and then it's quiet for a while. But the point is we have been adding members as people have seen the store up and running and seen that it's actually working.
So our mission is to support small local farms by providing a vibrant and welcoming retail space owned by a cooperative of Indiana growers that connects the Bloomington community with transparently sourced, healthful food. So our vendors have control, and they have control to set the prices for the products that they bring in, and then decide on what, how much, and how often to deliver the products that they produce. So we do have, as we spoke on earlier, non-farm vendors or artisan vendors. Sometimes we refer to them as artisan vendors. And they do sell in the farm stop. And then again, we spoke on the consignment model earlier, but we do have our fees currently set for farm vendors at 30% of the sales, and then artisan is 35% of their sales. We do not have a shelf space fee. And then in total, we have 78 total vendors. So that's our farm vendors and our artisan vendors. So as Mike spoke on earlier, we are open daily from 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And the professional product displays are out. And then our staff members are working continuously on rotating, calling, and then setting up all of the displays with signage and what's necessary for those products. There is walk-in cooler freezers for backstock of products, and then the cafe where drinks, food, and seating is available. There is free Wi-Fi, and then we do have art gallery out. I guess it depends on what exactly you say is an art gallery. I think all of our artisan products are part of our art gallery space that we have in the store, but on the wall.
Yeah, we have some walls dedicated to local artists' work, and they're selling their work that way.
So there are 2 categories as far as our vendors. So the farm vendors are the co-op members, and they engage in the production of any type of agricultural product. And then the artisan vendors are local entities that produce food or crafted goods using ingredients they did not grow or raise themselves. And the priority, as Mike spoke on earlier, that kind of bullseye that we're talking about, the geographic locality and proximity to the store itself, and then ecological production practices, and then beginning limited resource or socially disadvantaged farmers, and then sustainably producing their products, and then product quality, variety, and consistency. So we do have an application, and all of our vendors fill that out, and then they're asked questions related to these priorities of ours in that application.
And just to expand on that selection process a little bit, so these are not listed in any sort of order. They're just all factored in. We recognize the need for this process to be as transparent as possible. And so to that end, we're actually this year going to be working on trying to come up with some kind of a rubric or something that we can use to more objectively score vendors. The reality is at this point, we haven't rejected any vendor. We need vendors in the store. So it hasn't been an issue, but we recognize moving forward that could be. The way the process works is we have as Armonda alluded to earlier, a vendor selection committee, which consists of vendors. There's maybe one board member, staff, The idea is to try to get as broad a representation of our members and the vendors. Ideally, we might even have customers on there as we move forward over this year. But the idea is there's a committee that processes applications, reviews them, and then decides amongst the committee whether or not to recommend the vendor, and then they pass that on to the board, and then the board votes. And like I said, we haven't, I think there was maybe one vendor that we put on a wait list because they were 4 hours, 5 hours away. So other than that, pretty much everybody that has applied has been accepted.
Before I start this, do we have any questions that we can maybe answer?
I have a few, actually.
Okay.
What was the initial amount of farmers that began this process? How many farmers?
I guess it depends on where you ask where the
So
process
we'll
began.
Tell the story
We
a
have the
little bit,
story, yes.
Okay.
but I don't think it's got the specific numbers. So it actually started with a person who had a temporary grant-funded position at the City of Bloomington in the Office of Economic Sustainable Development. And from there, a broad net was cast to gauge interest. And from that outreach, I don't know, there were 15, 20-ish that said, hey, this sounds really cool, I want to know more about it. Out of that, there were, I think, maybe 9 to 10 that said, yeah, I think I want to put some time into helping this. And then a few months later, there were 6. So 6 carried it through, and then we've tried to expand the leadership, the board. This year, we'll actually increase the size of the board. But it sort of started like this and went down to, actually I said 6, but it was like 6 farmers and this person in that role with the city, so 7, and then has kind of been steadily growing.
So that kind of leads to my second question of, you mentioned this is nonprofit, so did you apply for a grant for purchase of your building and the initial setup?
So, yeah, we'll cover that. We
Okay.
did not actually apply for a grant. We actually got selected by the city to implement a budget line item that was funded through a city grant. So
Okay.
it's a subtle difference. The short answer is we did get grant money to start it.
So there really wasn't any farmer dollar investment, just time
If there was some.
in the story?
Some of the steering committee members contributed financially, not much, mostly in kind. So there was a lot of time. There was some materials for some of the build out.
So
And
if there was no financial investment of those initial farmers, then there would be no concern of like dividend payouts or
right,
anything like that to
yeah,
recoup their
right,
investment?
yeah, that's right. That's yeah.
That initial investment.
That money just got spent as a startup expense and didn't
We love you,
translate
Farm
into
Stop.
equity.
Yeah, here's our.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, okay, good.
But she got both all of your questions?
She.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so now we have a lovely video to show you about the shopping experience. Yeah, that's a nursery area in the springtime out there, and in the fall, yeah.
Yeah. When did you take this video? It was fall. It was late fall. So in the spring, that outside area is plants. We do our plant sales there. So it's sort of like a little garden center. In the fall, there's pumpkins, and over the holidays, there are Christmas trees out there. So that part of the store that we just saw is mostly the artisan goods, and Armonda is going to work her way towards the front of the store, walking through the grocery area, and at the very front is the cafe, just to sort of help orient you. The couple of the staff people were like darting ahead of the camera, trying to stay out of Armonda's way, so you can't really see anybody that's working there.
There have been like 6 people in the store ahead of us. I try not to get people. Not everybody wants to be recorded, so. Any questions now that you've seen the lovely shopper experience?
I think the key takeaway from that is that Armonda drinks coffee and eats apples and sweet potatoes, right?
Thanks. Yes, you have a question. Could you mind? Thank you.
So have you, with your vendor application process, have you had to venture into doing any kind of verification that people are actually growing the things that they are bringing you?
From my perspective of reading the applications and engaging with the vendors when they're doing their deliveries, no. There are some vendors who have filled out their application not as maybe thoroughly or completely, and so then we do go back to them and we ask them questions to just follow up, and they're usually pretty responsive, or in the case of a couple, we've not heard back, so then it's really up to them to try to follow up and engage if they do want to continue seeking to become a vendor. But no, most of them are, or I don't know, they were farmers market community members. So I guess that hasn't been an issue of, I understand what you're saying though. But no, we've not had an issue with trying to, make sure everybody's being honest about where they're growing and sourcing their food they're bringing. Yeah.
One of the advantages of this being an ag co-op with members participating kind of at different levels is there hasn't been anybody that's applied that somebody on the board or on the committee didn't know already. So it's kind of cool. We're leveraging our networks sort of collectively in a way that so far we haven't had to do anything like that, no inspections. And if we can achieve our goal of fostering new businesses closer to the store, then we might never really have to do that because we'll probably have those personal relationships in place that can sort of serve as that audit.
So my question would be, so I know you said you do fees for your initial members, and then you do, on top of that, you do a percentage of what you sell? Okay, make sure I understood that right. And then as for this bullseye, so do you automatically accept those that are the closest to the actual store? And what do you do? Did you eventually approve that 4 and 5 hour farmer away? Did you approve that person? Are they still on the waiting list?
So technically, I guess they're still on the waiting list. They're not vending. And the reason that we waitlisted them was because they were selling, I don't know if it was beef or some kind of meat that we already had 5, 6, 7 vendors supplying that were, a matter of miles or less from the store. So that was the main reason for that.
People that are the closest automatically are like, yes, please come.
Yeah, there's not really like an automatic. I mean, we do have that vendor committee that approves those applications, but I think I understand what you're trying to say. Yes, we want a vibrant community of multiple different farms involved. But, Mike spoke a little bit earlier. There's probably going to come a point where we're like, okay, we have enough meat vendors in particular. So, at that point, then we have to decide how are we going to say that final yes or no, and what does that look like? We're still developing a lot of that, so.
Yeah, so really the two kind of categories of products where that's a potential issue are produce and meat. Those are really the big ones. And we did actually have kind of a challenge with the meat pretty soon after we opened the doors. We've got so in the photo there, those two, there's 4 doors worth of freezer space back there. That's where the meat is. And we had way too much to fit in there because, like I said, it was kind of a free-for-all in the beginning. And so farmers, I've got a frozen product. I can take all of it to the store and let them store it. And so we were trying to cram a whole bunch of meat into that freezer, and it just didn't work. So we had to solve that. And it kind of forced us to actually work cooperatively, which was kind of it was tough, but it was sort of a cool thing too, because it really did enforce the cooperative, collaborative nature. So we had to basically sit down with the meat vendors to say, there's no space. You can't, how are we going to solve this? We can't be bringing this much. So collectively came up with a solution, which was a slightly different way to allocate the space. We invested in additional freezer at the back of the store so we could store overstock and not have to have it out here. We had issues. Some vendors were showing up and stocking the shelves themselves, and they were moving things around, and that wasn't fair, wasn't equitable, so we changed our policy, and so that only staff can do the stocking. So I suppose one reaction or response might have been to say, well, we've got too many meat vendors, let's try to eliminate some. But that's not the spirit of what we're trying to do. We really want to try to build this up to a point where there's room for all the vendors. It's not, it's not easy, and it's not going to happen right away. And so it requires us to work together as a farming community to try to figure out how to do this. Because, and I'll talk about this more, but one of the biggest challenges with this is that while a lot of farmers are used to working or to selling sort of adjacent to one another, it's not as common for farmers to really be cooperating in this way and putting your products on the shelf right next to somebody else's in a way that we're trying to make equitable. So, it's definitely stretching all of us a little bit, but that's how we solve that question about meat vendors. We've taken the same approach with produce. We basically haven't turned anybody away. There have been days where we've had way too much Swiss chard on the shelf, and then 2 days later, none. And so that's another area that, while we think we, for now, has sort of addressed the meat problem, this year our goal is to try to address that problem with the produce. But still, we haven't turned anybody away. We haven't made our selections or admitting vendors based on whether we have too much of something for the most part. And so, the proximity factors in only if something's not available nearby, so we source it from far away, and then it becomes available closer. In that case, we might replace the further one, although maybe, hopefully, we wouldn't have to. We'd be looking for both. So, any other questions?
Yeah.
So you're considered a restaurant and a grocery store. And I know Kentucky and Indiana are not going to be exactly the same, but what permits were required?
So we have a retail food establishment permit, and then there's some food safety training. We get inspected. We have a kitchen there that gets inspected. So that's the main one.
So it's a lot, but those are the basic things you have to meet. Yes. Yeah.
So when you say inspected, you mean it is a certified commercial kitchen?
Yeah, the
Yes,
By
kitchen.
the state.
Correct.
So
The
it gets inspected.
the kitchen
every
gets inspected.
6 months to 1 year.
Yep.
And you had to put in the 3 compartment sinks, and you had to do all the things required to get that kitchen there.
Yeah, we had to install adequate electric power.
Sure. Oh,
We
yeah.
had to install. We put in grease trap, so we have
Yeah.
to.
You have to have a bathroom
We've got 2
all those
bathrooms,
things,
right?
and
We
hand sinks and the mop sinks,
sinks
all
and
the
mops,
little
and
things,
in the kitchen, we elected not to have a range, an open flame range, because that then required a hood, which
Right.
was way out of our budget, and also required fire suppression system that was way out of the budget. So,
Okay.
so we use in the kitchen. We just have hot plates, so it limits what can be done in the kitchen, but it
Okay.
made it easier to get it licensed.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess with this theme of the money that needs to go into this, most of us small communities in Kentucky, we have open buildings. We have spaces like this that are sitting there not being used, and they're perfect for what you have here. But I'm being negative Nelly here. I mean, is that money? What do we have to do to be would you say a cooperative and be nonprofit and so forth? Those things have to be put in place, and then there's some grant monies out there available for this? Or is that not?
Potentially. It depends on what exactly how you organize it and how you go forth with seeking those grant dollars. So, the way our collective is set up is we're not a 501(c)(3). So there are still grant dollars that we wouldn't be able to go out and seek because of that. We're nonprofit in the state of, our state. Or is that federal? I'm sorry. Is it the federal?
Is that a 501(c), I believe it's called?
State. Yeah, the state.
501(c), or I think.
Yeah, that would be if you were seeking more of the grant dollars, typically those are the entities they're given to, but that's not our designation.
Yeah.
So, but you could set it up like that, but that would be different than what we're doing.
And you may be going into this later, but, I'm seeing all the different things everywhere that belong to all these people. They have to have their own labeling system. They have to have a code that goes with their products. So
Yes, everything is.
in turn is scanned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scanned as they go, as it's
POS.
being taken out, and that's how you keep up with your receipts and who gets what and so forth. So that all, there's apps out there, computer apps for that sort of thing?
So the vendors don't have to label their own
No,
products. It's
but we do in the
beneficial if
store.
They do.
Yeah.
There's actually an upside to it, but it's staff that put the little barcode stickers on each item.
What's the name of our POS system?
So yeah, we have a point of sale system that's really geared towards consignment. It's called Retail Edge, and it allows us to assign product ID to each product, and then staff will print out little stickers. So there's various ways to do that. There's an organization up in Ann Arbor, Michigan called Argus Farm Stop, which is really the model for ours, they started off without stickering individual products, and they just would have index cards located at each like basket or where the products were that had the product ID on there, and the idea was customers would take that up to the register, but in the end that didn't work very well, so they've strongly encouraged us to just start out by stickering individual products. But the farmers don't have to do that. The staff does it, correct.
Okay, so actually, since you're talking about staff, so do you hire like a full staff that's not, like there's not the farmers that have any of the products in there, correct?
Yeah, we'll go through. We have a lot more slides, but
Oh,
yes,
okay.
that's on one
Dedicated
of
to
them.
staff,
Yeah,
Okay, that's what I was
specifically.
gonna-
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so the rest of the presentations, we'll talk about how the
Okay.
intake, the delivery works. We'll talk about how we staffed it. Yeah,
Yes, so segue here, how it works for product intake specifically. So again, our vendors are delivering on their schedule when the product is the freshest, when they're harvesting, then they get that into the farm stop. So our deliveries are recorded on an intake sheet. You can see an example here in the lower left corner. And that intake form then goes to the staff. And then from that intake form, they're taking that information, creating those tags that come from the POS system, and then that goes with the product on the shelf. So again, yep, those stickers are printed, applied, and staff gets that out onto the shelves. So the intake and inventory sheet, here's a really big example of that. It's just filled out with, what the product is, how much of it total you brought, how many units you have there, and then the price per unit. And then on the far right there is notes. So sometimes the price will change, and we'll put price changed in that section so that the staff knows that we've changed the price, and to make sure that they change that in the system. What notes have you added? Have you added notes? Sometimes, like if it's add a different variety of something maybe nobody has seen before, you'll put like an extra note there about how this variety might be different than another variety. I like to grow a lot of different garlics, so I try to make sure to mention their specific garlic flavor profiles or usage, and so then when the staff create the display sign to go with that product, they can put those notes there. And then this video is about our vendor delivery experience. So this is the back side. This is where we bring our deliveries in. And all the vendors are required to sticker and label all of the containers that they're bringing in, so we know what it is and the date that it came in and who the producer is. And on the left here is the kitchen. I kind of swing through there, but I didn't turn on the light, so I apologize. It's kind of dark, but that's the kitchen area.
And the last thing you do is pick up your.
Yeah, don't forget to pick up your storage containers. That's like our biggest thing in the farm stuff. We're good at making deliveries, not always good at taking our equipment back to reuse it. So. Any questions before we move on?
So farmers use their own storage crates and then take them back. You don't have like rotating crates that are okay.
Not as of now. We do have the quart containers that they like put them out in if we want them to use those, but we don't have actual containers as far as like moving your product in and out of the store. No.
And have you had any issues with space in your walk-in? Like, does it get to a point in a certain time of season?
That was really full.
Okay.
From my perspective. Have you had perspectives where it's been fuller than that?
Yeah, it gets packed
Okay.
in there.
Yeah. So that could be another pain
Right.
point at some point.
Oh, well, hopefully not, but
Yeah.
yes, could be.
This may be coming up in a next slide, but as far as pricing goes, are the vendors setting their pricing, or are you all setting pricing, and how does that work?
The vendors are setting their pricing, and I myself, as a vendor at the farm stop, I am connecting with the managers in there and saying, hey, how did that price go? Do you think I should increase it? Do you think I should decrease it? What do you think? So I appreciate and value the community that we have there working to help give me feedback on if my product is selling well at the price that I want to set it at. Does that help? Yeah. Okay.
I guess I'd just say some vendors are pricing in the consignment fee. A lot of vendors, and this is an area that I think we mentioned it, but it's probably a thing we can help our vendor community as a whole on through training and maybe some sort of mindset shift. But they think of farmers market prices as like base zero, and so they're starting there and tacking the fee on, and so that results in things being a lot more expensive. Some things being a lot more expensive, and I think we've seen over the last year that farmers are realizing that, one, that's probably not going to be the best way to sell those products, and two, they're enjoying some benefits of this model that eliminate some of the costs that they might not really consider that are associated with farmers market, primarily in terms of time and lost opportunity, from time not on the farm. So, really what you've got here is a place to drop your products off, and somebody else is going to sell it for you 7 days a week. So over the next year, one of our goals is to work with farmers to talk about pricing and what are the real costs and how does this compare to some of your other outlets, and how to set a price that is a good price.
Yeah, as Mike and I were planning for the conference, that's one thing that he brought up is, in market, we typically think in easy increment numbers, but at the farm stop, we can do $2.15 and not have to be like concerned about, in that quick environment of making that type of transaction occur. Any other questions?
Well, I guess when you're doing this pricing, is there a way that you got carrots here and carrots there and carrots here, that this one's $1 more a pound and this one's the answer? How do customers understand that there's that difference between carrots? Is there a way that you can put on that
Signage.
bin like organically grown?
Yeah, every vendor's products is labeled, is in its own container or basket or bin with their farm name, where it's from, and the price.
Okay.
Yeah, each one is differentiated in its own little basket.
So if they want to charge more, they need to be more descriptive.
If you've never sold, through like a grocery store, it's a whole new thing to see your product right next to 4 others. You get compared quality-wise, you get compared price-wise, so it's kind of a whole new ballgame, and that's definitely something that, vendors, especially beginning vendors or vendors that have mostly sold at the farmer's market, like I said, mindset shift to sort of rethink about how this works.
Yeah, but then there are also some vendors who are not, they're just, this is the price I need and this is the price I'm going to have on it. And if people don't buy it, and that this allows them to do that. So, but yes, again, me as a vendor, I rely on the staff members to give me feedback on the product I brought in to help me better decide how either I need to change what I'm doing or look at changing my prices to make sure that I'm getting what I need from those products.
And there is an element of competition there, but again, underlying that is we think that together this experience can help elevate all of us, you know, make our games better. So that's some of the education that we think the cooperative can bring to our vendors. You know, over the next year, let's think of can we bring in people to talk to our farmers about pricing and about display and you know, how to increase shelf life or, you know, the aesthetic looks of your product, something
and
like
packaging and storing. I mean, again, most of us are going direct to market typically, so this store environment is quite new and opportunity to learn from for sure.
Yeah, and you know, another cool thing that's come out of it is I've seen more farmers talking with one another about, well, what are your pricing, and you know, does that seem right, or you know, should I adjust it? Should we, you know? So it has also, I think, fostered more not just cooperation but interaction too, which is kind of cool to see.
So I've left this up for a little bit, so hopefully most of you have read that. But this is what we have for our staffing. I mean, we do have part-time staff only at this point. And, you know, we would like to be able to offer more for our staff, but as of now, we're really kind of bare bones as far as operating the store. So, numbers.
This is probably what everybody's been waiting for.
On pens and needles, right? So, numbers. So, for our first year in sales, we were $572,000. In grocery, over $500,000. Cafe, $67,000.
Can I just interject real quick? So we opened in August of 2021, which was like 4 months later than we thought we would, and we missed the boat with a lot of the farmers. They didn't factor this outlet into their plan. So in August, oddly enough, we were struggling to get product into the store. So this represents 12 months where we started off struggling to get product and then went right into the winter, and nobody had planned for, you know, this outlet with winter production. So we're optimistic about sales for this year because we've already got the farmers on board, and we've already been talking to farmers and planning for this year. So, you know, we were pretty happy with that number, but we think it can be even better as our vendors get more comfortable with the model.
No, that was great, thank you. And so we are happy that we're, you know, utilizing the SNAP benefits that are in our community. And then we did obtain a grant that allows us to get 50% off of, or 50% match with those SNAP dollars. So our farmers, I'm sorry, 100%. We double the SNAP, I apologize.
So effectively, when customers come in and purchase through SNAP, they're getting half off of the price of the product.
Yeah.
Because we've got this generous donor.
Match. Yeah. And then our vendor payouts, you can see there, over 349,000. Payroll, we had a 132, over 132,000. Roundup for community organizations. So as part of our action as our farm stop, we want to have further action and impact in our community. And, you know, we have a roundup. So you come up and you check out, well, you have some cents, right? Well, I want to round up. So whatever extra cents makes it to that whole dollar goes into the Roundup program. So we donate over $3,500 through that program. And then our member equity number here is $74,000. We are not breaking even month to month. And we predict that another 12 months before we're able to make that happen. We are reliant on grant funding or donations until we're making that happen.
So I'll just expand on that a little bit. So it's a little scary that we're not breaking even on a monthly basis, but we are only 18 months into this new business, and we don't think that that's unreasonable for a new business. You know, a lot of businesses will take longer than that to reach that. So the problem is that we're not sitting on a lot of cash. The advantage that the consignment model has is that we are paying, we enjoy the revenue that was generated by the sale of products that we don't have to pay the farmers for until next month. So that's kind of helped out. We did a few things, like we encouraged to raise some more cash. We encouraged members to sign up for 2 years at once, and so some of our most ardent supporters were like, yeah, I'll pay an extra, it's $300 as the annual membership fee. So we generated some cash that way. But moving forward, we are, for this year, very focused on trying to find either grants, but mostly donations, because we've had some very active donors in our community that we think can help us out through this year. So it's not all rosy. We're still on kind of rocky ground, but we think if we can get through this period, we'll be okay. That's the short of it. There was a question. Okay.
Could you flip back to the previous slide? What is a member equity? Maybe I missed something there.
That's the member dues, and also that includes some of the equipment that was purchased.
Okay, so that's money coming in or money going out? Okay. Yeah. So it's cash that we had to work with, but it's also equity that our members have in the business. And if we decide to pay dividends, right now we don't pay dividends. Okay.
But if we did, or heaven forbid, we had to close up shop, that money would go back to the vendors. And we have our bylaws specify how that would happen. There's sort of a formula for that.
I was just wanting to get some clarity on the grants and donors, and that you said you're not a 501c3. So how are you applying for and getting those grants? Do you have like a fiscal sponsor, or how's that working?
So we haven't received, well, no, I take that back. We have. All but one of our grants we received in the very beginning to cover startup costs, and they didn't require us to be a nonprofit, tax deductible nonprofit. We did receive, so we got, and I have a slide to talk about this, but we did receive a grant recently from the organization that we got a loan from, and they focus on cooperatives, and they didn't require us to be nonprofit. The donations, that's kind of an issue. We happen to have a couple of donors that it didn't matter to, that they couldn't write it off. Moving forward, we think that's going to be an issue, so we've talked about forming maybe a sister nonprofit, like a Friends of. In the meantime, we've been working with a sponsor, but we're not sure how long we'll continue to, they may want to spend their money other ways. So that's something we're working on this year.
And then, since I have the mic, I do have one question from earlier, which is, when you were getting started and getting members to apply, did you have any outreach to farmers to be sure that they knew it was operating? And one of your bullet points was like small and minority farmers. How are you reaching the farmers in your community?
Yes, that's a good question. So initially, we reached out to vendors at the various farmers markets, and we also worked through some ag agents, like the Extension and other ag-related agencies, to try to get the word out. We use social media and encourage word of mouth.
I know that you said that it was very advantageous to have that city budget line item there for your initial startup. But can you give us an idea of what that amount is?
It's laid out on one of the slides later on. Yeah, specifically that dollar number. Yeah, all the dollar numbers.
Oh, wait.
It could be part of the budget, maybe. Is what she's saying. Yeah. Go for it.
Also, I wanted to say we have about 5 minutes left, so.
I thought we'd be done in an hour.
See, I knew he was.
Okay, so I'll do this real quick. So here's our timeline. Fall of 2018, Bloomington, along with several other entities in the state, received a statewide USDA grant called Indiana Farm Connect. And the goal of that grant was to develop regional supply chains that connected farmers with institutional buyers. In the spring, the following spring, the city actually funded this position through the grant. They called the position the local food coordinator, and that was through the city's Office of Economic and Sustainable Development. It was a temporary position just for the duration of the grant, and this person was tasked with trying to interview stakeholders and figure out how to implement this supply chain grant. So that summer, they conducted stakeholder interviews. They met with farmers and institutional buyers, tried to find out what they each wanted and can do. The result was the conclusion that it just wasn't going to work right now. Neither the farmers nor the institutions seemed to be interested in making whatever changes were necessary to make this happen. So the local food coordinator pivoted and started searching for other ways to support the local food economy. And in the process, they discovered the farm stop model. Specifically, and I mentioned it before, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, there is something called the Argus Farm Stop. And there are actually some others. There's one in Worcester, Ohio. There's one in West Virginia. So Argus is not the first, but Argus has been probably the most visible in trying to spread the model in a very open, transparent way. So the winter of 2020, so January of 2020, a group of farmers and food system advocates from our county went to Ann Arbor and completed a 3-day intensive training with the folks there to learn how they started their farm stop, what it took to run it, and to get recommendations on how to apply the model in Bloomington. And as a result of that, everybody that attended, so that was, prior to that meeting, was some of the outreach to say, hey, we're going to do this, who would like to come on this trip? As a result of that meeting, there was general consensus that this might be a good thing for Bloomington, and we wanted to figure out how to do it. So we had an idea and we had interest. The next step was to start envisioning what this could look like in Bloomington. So in early summer of 2020, we did some of the outreach that I mentioned, where we tried to get input from as many people in our ag community as possible. So that's where we reached out to farmers market vendors through social media, extension, and other ag agencies. And that was where I was describing, we started with this many people, and then it kind of whittled down to this many, and that became the initial steering committee, the people that had the interest and motivation to try to carry this thing through. The problem was we didn't have any money. So we had this awesome idea, but it wasn't going to go anywhere because none of us had the money to put into it. And so it kind of just sat until late summer. We found out that the local food coordinator had been working with the Office of Economic and Sustainable Development to utilize some pandemic relief grant money that a program the city had put together called the Recover Forward. They had allocated some of that money in their office's budget to try to implement this farm stop model. But in order to receive it, we had to be a legal entity. So that's what kicked off the work of trying to decide how we were going to incorporate. And in the fall of 2020, we had finally settled on the agricultural cooperative. We worked with an attorney to get our articles and bylaws drafted and filed. And we started working with a realtor to find a building to lease. By midwinter, so actually it was like January of 2021, we found a building, signed a lease, and started doing build out. So we basically, as I mentioned before, it was previously an appliance store that had been there for a long, long time. We had to rip a bunch of stuff out. We had to install electric, plumbing, grease trap. We had to finish the floors, had a whole bunch of stuff to do. So we did all that work. That's where a lot of the in-kind contribution came in. So a lot of the steering committee members were in there doing the actual work. We tried to do, being farmers, we tried to DIY as much of it as we could. Some of it we couldn't. And we also began at that point purchasing equipment and supplies. So that's when we started buying the walk-in cooler, the CoolBot, and the air conditioner, and the merchandisers. And that winter, then, we also started recruiting vendors. So we had more call-out meetings to gauge interest and tried to do product planning as much as we could, not really knowing how to do it. So by that point, so this was winter of 2021, we had an idea, we had the interest, now we had the money, and we had a place. And so in the spring, we hired staff and began onboarding vendors. We hired a manager, an assistant manager, and some sales associates. And 4 months after we thought we would, in August of 21, we actually opened the doors and waited for the customers to come. So that's as quickly as I could go through the timeline. Looking at some of the skill sets that were required of the steering committee, the primary one was passion for local food and a desire to help farmers, but a really practical, important one was time. We invested collectively probably 10 plus hours a week for week after week after week for this whole year to get this thing up and running. It required organizational, writing, construction, computer skills, so we had to find those skills among the people that were willing to donate their time to make it happen. And this is a surprise to me, but the food service experience was actually really important, especially in getting the cafe up. So we had some folks that had worked in the retail industry, restaurant industry for a while, and that proved to be very beneficial. So the funding, it took a little over $250,000 to get this thing up off the ground.
Here are your numbers.
188 was that pandemic relief grant through the city. We got an $18,000 community foundation grant. We did borrow $50,000 to purchase the equipment, and that was through an organization called CoBank. If you're interested in any sort of cooperative effort, tap into them because they're all about cooperatives. There was money from member dues, and then as I mentioned, we had some private donations, and there was like 1 or 2 other small grants. Has everybody gotten a photo that wants one? Okay. Finding a space, we did work with a commercial realtor, and we identified some criteria that we really thought were important. One was we really wanted it to be an interesting space that people wanted to spend time in. We wanted it to be accessible, so we wanted it to be walkable and bikeable, needed good parking, and enough space.
Is there anything you really, really want to hit? Because I think we're done.
Yeah, I'm just gonna. So I think the keys to success, without the money, the grant money, it never would have happened. And without the dedication and time contribution from that initial group, it wouldn't have happened. So, any effort like this is going to have to find those 2 things, I think, to get it up off the ground. I know of a couple of other efforts that have stalled out because they couldn't find the money to do it. And then I think we've already talked about these. So our challenges this year are to try to get to a point where we're breaking even, and also improve our product mix and the consistency, and our plan is to do that by working with our farmers to help them collaboratively plan and coordinate what's coming to the store. So as I said before, it's a new thing. That sort of collaborative planning is new, so we're trying to figure it out too, but that makes it a challenge. I think I covered all that. I think that's the end. So real quick, I realize we don't have it anywhere on here, but we have a website, rosehillfarmstop.com, and there's a Facebook page as well, so you can go there and find out more information. Thank you.
Mike and Armonda, thank you so much. This is
And
super
find us if
interesting.
you have other questions too.